On today's episode, we are once again discussing the Shidduch crisis, and joining us to share his thoughts, renowned teacher, lecturer, writer, Makarev, Rabbi Yitschak Rudomin. He's president and founder of the Jewish Professionals Institute. He's an alumnus of Yeshiva Chaim Berlin. He's done extensive research on the impact of the Holocaust on Jewish education, and that is a small portion of his very lengthy resume. And he has spent a lot of time on the Shidduch crisis, writing about it, speaking about it, analyzing it. Rabbi Rudimon, it is a real privilege to welcome you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure, and I'm excited to see what we discuss, what we delve into over here, and what we come out with. You've spent a long time, yes, studying this issue, and you've, Baruch Hashem, married off your own children, so you have personal experiences as well. You have some novel ideas about the Shidduch crisis. That's no secret. You've written about it. You have potential solutions, maybe some out-of-the-box solutions. I think the first question that I'm curious about from your perspective is, let's start at the beginning. How do you define the Shidduch crisis, and what would you say, in your opinion, are the root causes of it?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that in the overall sense, there isn't a Shidduch crisis, meaning that overall, among the Frum, Haredi, Hasidish, even modern Orthodox communities, almost everyone gets married. You know, it's Baruch Hashem, it's a situation where we are seeing a lot of brachas and a lot of growth and a lot of wonderful things happening as far as people getting married. But in some communities, more than others, there is a minority, a significant minority, that's finding it either difficult to get married or get married at all. So in that area where they have difficulty getting married, it's been given the name the Shidduch crisis. Now, it depends on which community we're talking about. From your previous podcasts, I see that your interest is in the Yeshivish community, the Litvish, so-called Litvish community, not the Hasidish community. So over there,
not interested in the other, but right, that's what I'm familiar with. That's what I'm, mostly focused on for the sake of this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, there's a lot of articles that are being written. There's organizations. There are some shadchanim who talk about it, who write about it. So it's a known thing. I just must add that my background is, I came to Yeshiva late in life. I was 23 years old when I came to learn in Yeshiva. Before that, my objective was to be a history teacher. So I have 3 degrees in history, the subject of history, world history, and some of it is in Jewish history. So my perspective is more of a historian and not so much of a social scientist. You know, the social sciences are like sociology, psychology, political science.
Right.
And they work a lot with statistics and surveys and collecting data. Historians work with written records, basically. Without written records, there's no history. So that's why Yiddishkeit is a perfect subject for history, because there's a lot of written records,
Right.
So and also I've been trained to analyze situations, historical situations, political situations, social situations, economic situations, even though economics is one of the social sciences. So that's how I started looking at shidduchim. First of all, my own experiences was when I came to Yeshiva, I was single, and I dated through the Yeshiva system. I was in Chaim Berlin, and I followed the protocols of the Yeshiva system. And then, Baruch Hashem, when I got married, I had 5 kids. From 2005 to 2015, it took me 10 years to marry off 5 kids. It took us, me and my wife. Of course, it was a combined effort.
Yeah.
And I was myself accumulating a lot of information. So sometime after I married off my last child, someone asked me if the Shidduch crisis had affected me. So I thought about it, and I said, actually, it hadn't, because Baruch Hashem, I mean, we had setbacks, we moved forward, we went through all the different parshiyas, but we never got stuck with a single child that was unable to find a shidduch, at the very end. So I wrote a couple of articles, which was picked up by Matzav in 2016, matzav.org, and they published them.
Yeah.
And then one of the ideas that I floated was the idea that sending girls to seminaries had become a luxury. It takes girls out of it takes them out of the zone of thinking about shidduchim, because when she's in, let's say, in high school, I'm talking about in the yeshivish world now, right? In the yeshivish world. When she's in high school, she's dreaming about going to Eretz Yisrael. So she's about 18. When she's 19, she goes to Eretz Yisrael. She's not focused on shidduchim. I'm just talking about she as just employment.
Yes.
And then when she's 20, she comes back. She has to depressurize from being in seminary. So basically, she's ready to go out when she's 21. That's how it comes out.
Right.
So logically speaking, I felt that it came to me that the girls are putting themselves out of the market, out of the shidduch game, whatever you want to call it, the shidduch field, shidduchim, from the age of 18, 19, 20, and even 21. That's 4 years. And for a girl, and a lot of people were offended when I said she's in the prime of her life as a young woman.
Right.
That's the age when.
Yes, and
that's when the age when guys looking for. That's the age. I'll let you speak in a minute. That's the age when guys are looking for girls. That age, the 18, 19, 20, 21. So as the guys, whether it's a 20-year-old guy, a 21-year-old guy, a 25-year-old guy, even a 30-year-old guy, he's looking for a 21 or 20-year-old girl. And there's a whole pileup. And as some of the girls who don't make the shidduchim, don't get a successful shidduch, they'll end up being single. So that was one part of the coin. The other part of the coin is recently, you mentioned it on your podcasts, that 4 American Rosh Yeshiva went to visit Rav Hirsch in Israel and to think about cutting back a year of Eretz Yisrael. And then I got thinking, it brought me back to those articles I wrote, that it's not just the girls, the boys themselves are taken out of the parsha of shidduchim by going to Eretz Yisrael. And maybe we've gotten our priorities mixed up, because we can only focus on one main project. Is the project learning in Eretz Yisrael, or is the project to find a shidduch? So maybe boys too should be held back from going to Eretz Yisrael. They can learn in America and date the girls. The boys and the girls should date as they come out of high school or seminary, or while they're here in America, and then go to Eretz Yisrael later to learn in Kailo. Right. So that sums up my view.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Very good summation of your view. And I want to discuss the solutions, but again, it comes down to first sort of defining the problem and making sure that the solution fits the problem. So you mentioned that even though the majority of boys and girls, Baruch Hashem, do get married, but there's a minority, let's call it a significant minority, that does not. We don't know the number, like you said. We don't have exactly good data, but it may be 8 or 10%.
Well, in the frum world, we don't live with surveys. We don't live with statistics.
Okay.
But
it may be. It may be 8 or 10%.
We live with.
It's if put it this way, if there's 20 or 30 or 40 girls out there, Rahman al 30 years old, 35 years old who are not married, that's a lot. If it's 50, 60, that's even more. Yes. Right? Even one is too many.
I recently heard, it's like living in the frum world is, there's this expression in the old Soviet Union, it was called Kremlin watching. Are you familiar with that phrase? Kremlin watching. Used to try to figure out the politics in Russia, like who's up and who's down, who's in and who's out, by watching when they would have a parade on Red Square. So who is standing on the parade and the Kremlin, and then from that figuring out, the whole situation. Right. So a little bit in the frum world, it's lahavdil. It's like sort of like Kremlin watching. You're trying to figure out things and extrapolate and You have you have one ois or one word in a pasuk, and from that you're trying to make a whole limud in a mishnah, and from that you're going to have a gemara, and from then it becomes a whole pilpul. So I recently heard that in Lakewood, 1/3 of girls over the age of 23 are still single. Okay. That's what I heard from someone reliable. I don't even recall.
High, but yeah, look, we don't know. There's a lot. So now here's the question. The question is, would you agree, or would you say that it's probably more girls than boys that are unmarried? I mean, do you think?
That's what I hear.
Yeah, that's what they say. So
I myself, like I told you, I haven't done a survey. I haven't done a statistical study. You'd have to go knocking on doors,
right?
You know?
But that would mean, but if that's true, if we would say that, let's say, if there's a pool of 1,000 boys and 1,000 girls, if we would say, well, let's say 1/3, let's say 200 girls are not married, but you have boys that are married and girls that are not, then there's a disconnect there. Doesn't that mean there's not enough? The number of boys is not enough for the number of girls? There's more girls out there than boys. Wouldn't that have to be?
Yes, evidently. So I remember when I was doing my secular studies that the accepted idea was that there are more females in the world than males. More females are born than males. Now I don't know numbers.
Yeah, but
I know that was always the accepted thing in historical studies. There's always more of a female population.
It's a very tiny number. If it is, it's going to be 51 girls to 50 boys, or 51 girls to 55 boys. Not enough to explain, but let's assume that was true.
In the olden days, men used to go out to fight wars.
Yeah.
Men used to go out to fight wars, so they got killed. Men were involved in hard labor. It was the work that people used to do before we had industry and technology. The people who used to work in the fields and used to knock the rocks, and people used to do hard work and get killed. Fish in rivers, fish in the seas, get killed, drown in the oceans. So men were always declining, whilst women remain more or less stable. So they started off with an advantage, but the numbers of women continued to grow. That's why there was always a system, even in the Torah, of men being allowed to marry more than one woman.
Okay,
and therefore that would take care of a singles problem.
Yeah. Now, but let's assume there are more girls than boys.
In ancient times, they never had a singles problem.
For whatever reason, let's assume there are more girls than boys. So your solution of sending girls, not sending girls to seminary, or girls starting to date earlier, nothing's going to change the numbers, which is that there are more girls than boys. Or any solution you come up with where girls date earlier or anything like that, like girls being less picky, whatever you're going to say, but how is that going to solve the problem if there's just the numbers? There's just 50 girls for every 40 boys.
I don't know if it solves the problem, but someone once called me when I wrote those articles for Matzav, and he said letting more girls into the pool of eligible dating girls is going to make the situation worse. So I said, we talk too much like university professors. We have to talk a little bit like people who have emunah and bitachon. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running this world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who's making the populations boom. He's, three gimel shutfin ba'adam. There's 3 partners in the creation of a human being. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after Brias Ha'olam, it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Isaac and being mezavik zivugim. So Hashem is running the world. I think a little bit we're trying to be iber klug by trying to line up statistics. So what are we going to do now? Artificially, like this idea now, we'll take away 12th grade from boys.
So
I think that's a terrible idea.
Okay.
Because it messes up the whole educational system in America. Unless you're Hasidish, where they don't place a lot of emphasis on finishing high school.
Well,
but in the Litvish world, it's still pretty much connected to the American educational system. and having a 12th grade high school diploma, even if it's not Regents or officially recognized by the state of New Jersey, but the fact that you have a high school diploma is important, because one day the majority of Bacharim are going to become Balabatim, and they're going to go out of work. And a lot of them, you're going to be asked, did you finish high school? And it's going to be a terrible thing. They're going to say, no, I didn't. You know, Chasidim have their own connections. Chasidim, they're in real estate and in wholesale and in retail and all kinds of practical things. They don't ask for high school diplomas.
So
but a Litvish who's going to go out in the world and say, do you have a high school diploma? I think it's a terrible thing.
So a couple of points. Number one, I do think that
terrible idea being Mavatal 12th grade. And I think it's even crazier, if I may say, and I'm using extreme language, to say girls have to be kept to 13th grade. There's no such thing in America as 13th grade. In Canada, they have 13th grade, maybe in Britain. But in America, everybody is 12th grade, and the next step is seminary for girls.
Now, I'm going to get to the age gap in a minute in the statistics, but let's say, would you agree, if 100 girls right now are suffering, are 23, 24, 25 years old, and they're desperate to get married, and there are not enough boys, and they're literally bizarre, these radical solutions, again, it's for a gadol to decide, it's for a Hirsch, it's not for me and you, but...
Of course, we're just talking. We're just talking.
Girls, exactly, we're schmoozing. If it would make 100 girls, or 150 girls, or 200 girls, or in the future, 500 girls, get married instead of be single, and have families instead of be alumnus basically, and without never been married, agunas. Then
look. Wait, whoa.
If it wouldn't solve the problem, it's one thing.
Let's not call them agunas. Let's not call them almanas. They are. You want to call them the English word spinsters? Okay, spinsters. Let's be accurate in our terminology.
I appreciate
because
that.
An aguna is a very specific type of situation, a very tragic type of situation.
Fine.
Big poskim. Bishop Feinstein, big poskim break their heads to figure out how to matir an aguna, you know?
Yeah.
But and an almana is also a different type of situation.
But from the
perspective, as a matter of fact, an almana is a woman who's been married.
Yes.
And usually almanas have children.
Yes.
And I'll tell you from a social work point of view, that my wife's a social worker, so I pick up little ideas here and there. People who've been married before stand a very, very, very high chance of getting remarried. So an almana actually, potentially, because she's been married, she's familiar with how to deal in a relationship with a man, a husband, she has a greater chance of getting married. So let's not call these single girls either agunas or almanas.
Understood, agreed, but I don't want to get caught up in sidetrack again. But the point is, and we can get into the age gap, and the age gap in a nutshell, the idea is that roughly the same amount of boys and girls are born every year. So if this year you have 100 boys, 100 girls born, next year you'll have 110 boys, 110 girls born, something like that. There's population growth. So if older boys, 22, 23-year-old boys are dating younger girls, then you have an imbalance because there's more girls younger than there are boys who are a little bit older. And then adding, and I'm not saying that I support or don't endorse the idea of adding a 13th grade or of skipping 12th grade. I do think you can get a degree, by the way, a high school diploma after 11th grade in a lot of schools. I think they can arrange that. But I don't think the diploma is going to be the main issue.
Yeah, that's because they make being in 12th grade.
First-year-based measures. But I hear what you're saying about how it's a radical idea. But again, if the bottom line is it comes down to numbers, one approach you mentioned is emunah bitachon. So if you want to take the approach that, listen, yeah, bitachon in Hashem, Hashem runs the world, so therefore we keep the status quo, then that's fine. We watch them suffer. You know, again, that's a shayla for a gadol. I'm not endorsing that, but that would be one approach. But if we are going to try to solve the problem, the solution has to make sense. So I don't see how, respectfully, I don't see how sending girls, not sending girls to Israel and basically skipping seminary, I just don't see how that would solve the problem. That was really what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. Okay. You have a point. I'm not disagreeing with you. You do have a valid point there. I don't have an answer. With your approach, if you're taking that approach with the age gap theory. But there's something else. I also mentioned it in my articles that I wrote for Matzav in 2016, is that if you look at the other Haredi community in America, meaning the Hasidic community, from what I understand and from what I see, they don't have a shidduch crisis. Am I right or wrong?
That's again, probably a lot of it's anecdotal. I don't know if there's hard data. That's what they say. They say, if anything, maybe a little bit in the other direction, where maybe there are actually some more unmarried men than unmarried girls. But yeah, they certainly don't have a shidduch crisis where there's women.
It's Babav.
Right.
Lubavitch is a little bit of an exception because some of them spend time traveling around.
Yeah, it's a very different culture. And by the way, the age gap, people who believe in the age gap, they will tell you that the reason is because Chasidim actually do date much closer in age, like you said, because they don't have the seminary system and because they're going out to work a lot earlier. You know, again, I don't want to generalize, but that's general. So you'll have 19-year-old and 20-year-old Hasidic men marrying 20-year-old Hasidic women for the most part.
Because you see, now I'm going to mention something else that I brought up when people started attacking me when I suggested maybe girls should skip seminary. Is as I said, look, I'm not making this up. It's not my religion, you know, but it does say in Pirkei Avos, ben 18 lechuppah. You know, 18 is like a time. Well, okay, boys. Well, a boy can't get married unless he has a girl.
Yeah, okay, I didn't mean to contradict you. I understand. I just wanted to clarify that. But yes, you wanted accuracy before. So
it's like I mean, it's a thick ratio. If you're going to get married, he's marrying a girl. It's obvious. I mean, so yes, it goes together. He doesn't have the
60-year-old woman. Ask him.
He has the mitzvah of pruruvu.
Yes.
Partner, so it goes together.
Yes.
100%.
And by the way, that's another.
I double checked again today. It says in Evan Ha'ezer that a person should be married, a boy should be married by the age of 20, and if not, Beis Din can force him to get married, unless he's Oisek B'Torah. So that's the heter. He's Oisek B'Torah, so he can put off a few years, maybe. And then, of course, they talk about Ben Azai, but today there's no Ben Azai.
No.
If anybody claims he's a Ben Azai, we look at him very funny. So you see that Pirkei Avos, the Torah Shebaal Peh, and the Shulchan Aruch say the marriageable age is between 18 to 20.
By the way,
now for girls, that's definitely true. For a girl, I'm talking biologically from a female, feminine point of view. She's in her prime. You know, I used an expression that a lot of people didn't like. It's like fruit on the vine when it becomes ripe. That's when a female, I'm not just talking about a frum girl, that's when females reach a certain prime age. You can see lahavdil in the world, actresses, sports celebrities, people who the public admires. Soldiers. Age, you know, people who are photogenic, that is the age when a female becomes developed as a female, and it's like she's blossoming and she's saying to the bees, you know, come and fertilize me. Yeah, I'm just using words from nature, you know, from the world out there.
Understood.
And
understood. I don't find that offensive at all.
What?
I don't know why people found that offensive. Yeah, I think that point, is a very, very.
No, it says 18 b'shmona lechuppah, and the Shulchan Aruch says 20, and the Beis Din can even force him. And so for girls, it's important to be focused because they have less of a window of opportunities. And a boy, I just read an article about older singles. You know, we're talking about younger singles all the time. We should also focus on the older singles, like when they go above age 25 to age 30 and even more. That's also part of the singles problem.
Absolutely.
The crisis.
Even bigger. I mean, they're further along. And yeah.
The boy has a few years in Yeshiva, the Torah belt, that is a heter we give them because they're steiging and learning and developing and becoming B'nai Torah. So we give them that heter. But I think the time has come to reevaluate that whole thing. This is the meaning, I think, I'm understanding it, the way the Roshei Yeshiva are going to Eretz Yisrael to discuss with Rav Hirsch. It's a pity they're only talking to one gadol. You need to talk to a lot more.
As far as we don't know. And Rav Hirsch is not to diminish Chas v'Shalom. And Rav Hirsch, is a tremendous gadol.
No, he's a gadol b'Yisrael, but such a thing, you need to be talking to.
Yes,
it needs a consensus. The Moetzes Gedolah HaTorah in America, in Israel, of the Aguda, of the Degel Torah, that level of gadol needs to be consulted because it's a problem. Now, I think one of the things is, I wrote, because I have an interest in the Holocaust, I also mentioned that America after the Holocaust was in like an emergency mode of getting people, to build people up quickly to become B'nai and B'nos Torah. So part of that for Yechidim, as an exclusive elite thing, people were sent to Eretz Yisrael. But then it's become this mass thing of a year in Israel, regardless if you need it or you don't. And we have, Baruch Hashem, the meisters in America, where people can learn and steig aus and grow and become big Talmidei Chachamim. It's not as necessary. I don't see a year in the Mir as being that much greater than another year in Lakewood. For example, we're talking about the two biggest yeshivas. Why do they have to? Then I spend time getting ready to go to Eretz Yisrael, being in Eretz Yisrael, deprogramming from Eretz Yisrael, running around in Eretz Yisrael. Somebody told me Bein Hazmanim is a problem in Eretz Yisrael. So
I certainly appreciate that perspective.
We have the infrastructure. We have the infrastructure here in America that is producing B'nai Torah, Talmidei Chachamim, B'nos Torah. The Beis Yaakovs are doing a tremendous job, and I think boys and girls, young men and women, are ready when they graduate high school to start dating, just like Chasidim do. I don't see, and you mentioned that the Project Nasi on your other podcast has been lowering the age. I don't think it's just Project Nasi. I think they do good work, but I think it's the fact that that yeshivish society has become frummer, more Haredi,
right,
and more similar in working mode to the Hasidic model, and that's why we are getting closer to the time when boys and girls will start dating earlier, should start dating earlier, and producing the marriages, because you have to focus on what's your main goal, what's the Iker and what's the Tafel.
I hear you.
Is the Iker Eretz Yisrael or is the Iker Shidduchim? They say, well, they both. It can't be both, because if the Iker is Shidduchim, you will stay in America. You will look for a shidduch. You will start being born of the Bais Niman Be Yisrael, and then subsequently, when you get married, in my recent article on Israel National News, I said they can go and learn in Kollel in Eretz Yisrael, being born of the Bais Niman as a couple.
And I completely appreciate that perspective a lot. And you're making a lot of very valid and points that are very thought-provoking. I mean, I'm curious, before we close it out, your perspective as a historian. You mentioned that if you look at Shulchan Aruch, you look at the Rambam, it would sound like 18 lechatchila, maybe push it off to 20. The current situation that we have does not reflect, and again, I'm not issuing any psak halacha or saying anything wrong. However, it certainly is different what's put into practice than anybody who would look at the Gemara, look at the halacha. What was happening in Europe 120 years ago, 150 years ago, 200 years ago in the Litvisher community? Were boys marrying at 20? Were they marrying at 22, 23? Do you happen to know?
Now, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch actually says you should start trying to get married when you're 13. 13.
Imagine that.
And that would be the ideal, but definitely by 18. And if by 20 not, oy gewalt, we force the poor guy. I think in Europe, you used to hear of earlier marriages.
Very interesting.
I'm not talking about when there were wars and pogroms and dislocation. I think when people lived in peace, and then the chassan would go and live with the girl's parents. That from what I read and from what I know, that was a common, and by a lot of gedolim and rabbanim, they would be taken in by the in-laws as children and live as man and wife.
Yes. Okay. And
Europe is a different story. And then the Holocaust came, World War I, World War II. It dislocated the communist revolution, dislocated everything. People came to America. It caused the dislocation. Now, Baruch Hashem, we've got our 2 feet on the ground as a community. I'm talking about the Frum Yeshiva community. We've got our feet on the ground. We're established. We're not rebuilding like after the war. We don't want to like Rav Hutner and Chaim Belen. He had this crash program to make as many Mabitzei Torah and Gdolim and Zvulons as he could. We, on the other hand, we're established. And like the Chasidim, I think we should take a page out of their playbook, and we should, look, we eat their food, right? All the food, I was just thinking, all the food we eat comes with Hasidic hechsherim. Have you ever heard of a Litvish hechsher besides the OU?
Well, I mean, probably the Star K and the CRC comes to mind, but I understand your point.
Yeah, okay, but we basically eat Hasidic food with Hasidic. The meat, the shachtim are probably all Hasidim.
Yeah, for the most part. I'm not an expert, but yeah, 100%.
Our dress mode has changed. I recently heard something from Rav Nata Greenblatt, the influence of the Chasidim. Our dress mode has changed. Litvish used to dress with light jackets. Even the women were not that careful with covering their hair. But Baruch Hashem, today, it's the Hasidic influence. Darker clothing, women are more careful with covering their hair. Tznius has improved, even though there are problems. I'm not ignoring problems, but tznius has improved.
Oh, yeah.
And so we should be taking so many things de facto out of their playbook. We should take this other thing. And the same thing for the very Haredi communities in Eretz Yisrael. They're also very similar. I'm talking about the Hasidic and the non-Hasidic Haredi communities, the Yerushalmim and the Bnei Brak people. I don't hear they have a shidduch crisis. It's just us.
Yeah.
We need to eradicate some of the major distractions. And this is on my mind. Eretz Yisrael has become a luxury and a major distraction.
Okay.
As far as your opinion about the age gap theory not improving it, let's leave that for a different time. I have to think about it more.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your clarity. Like I said, you bring thought-provoking ideas to the table, and most importantly, you have an incredibly sincere demeanor, and this is something that you care very, very deeply about, and I really respect that. And we have to leave it there. So,
personally, from a family point of view, I live in a frum community in Flatbush. I see what's going on. It's all around me.
Yes. Okay. We're going to leave it there just because we're almost out of time here. Rabbi Yitschak Rudomin, renowned teacher, lecturer, Makarev, and president and founder of the Jewish Professionals Institute. This has been an enlightening, very, very important discussion, and I really appreciate it. And I hope we do it again. Bez Hashem.
Kol Tov.
Rabbi Yitschak Rudomin on the VIN podcast. Kol Tov.